through correspondence. All right, let me get to Robert E. Howard. Robert Irvin Howard, who's around from 1906 to 1936, who becomes the new dominant force in Weird Tales via Lovecraft's advisory help. They're constantly corresponding one to the other, and Lovecraft is advising Howard. Howard is a very prolific writer, but most famous for his barbarian hero Conan. Now, before he commits suicide at age 30, Howard blows his brains out. He blows his head clean off with a shotgun. This man's talent revolutionizes the fantasy horror genres. Howard amalgamates historical adventure with supernatural horror. He essentially creates these sword and sorcery stories that invoke supernatural dread. Conan, Kull, Solomon Kane. These characters are highly influential. Howard tries every kind of pulp market. Detective stories, spy stories, yellow peril stories, westerns. His fiction reflects his own passionate interest in ancient history and the American Western frontier. Howard makes his first sales as a writer during his teenage years, then shows an early and lasting interest in the supernatural and horrific. Lovecraft, as I mentioned, encourages and advises Howard via correspondence. Lovecraft feels that Howard is a great storyteller, and he does everything he possibly can to help Howard out. Howard's stories, The Horror from the Mound, 1932, The Man on the Ground, 1933, The Dead Remember, 1936, feature a Western milieu for the supernatural. Howard has a vivid imagination that is encouraged by Lovecraft. He experiments constantly. Howard makes an effort to widen his markets. He tests and mutates different genres and story types. For example, Conan, A Witch Shall Be Born. This is an adventure tale that has an intrusion of a Lovecraftian monster at the climax of the story. We have The Thing on the Roof, 1932. Old Garfield's Heart, 1933. Shadow of the Beast, 1935. All of these stories use elements of the Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos cycle. Howard, his writing derives from the stories that he heard as a child, from the family's African-American cook, and stories spun to him by his Celtic grandmother. Essentially, he's influenced by Gaelic myths and African-American folktales. For example, you have Black Canaan, 1936, Pigeons from Hell, which is published posthumously in 1938, and Worms of the Earth, 1932. These stories feature strong atmospheres of doom combined with horrific scenes. Their storytelling at full tilt. Now, Worms of the Earth, well, this sword and sorcery tale ranks with the greatest writings of Lovecraft or C.A. Smith. This tale, Worms of the Earth, is set in the era of the Roman conquest / occupation of British Caledonia. The king of the barbaric Pits vows vengeance on the Romans and decides to manipulate a legendary race known as the Worms of the Earth. This concept derives directly from Arthur Macon's novel The Black Seal, 1895. Howard amalgamates gruesome nightmares, ghosts, voodoo, murder, hypnotism, lycanthropy into a supremely creepy storytelling. He learns his tricks from Lovecraft, and Howard is now the king of weird tales. Now, as I mentioned, during 1931 and 1935, Lovecraft submits little for publication. He spends time traveling with friends and working as a ghostwriter and advisor to younger and gifted